Folks, this is Book Talk with Corbin. I'm your host. We have with us Mr. James Peden. He's been with us before. He serves on the Metro City Council here in Louisville, Kentucky. The interview we had done with him once before is on Breonna Taylor. I strongly suggest you check that out. In fact, I was just talking to somebody about that not too long ago, and they were surprised. Well, I didn't know that. And I said, well, that's why I go to people like him. You know, he can give you some perspectives some information, some insights that a lot of people aren't getting out there. You know, so you need to go to people like Mr. Peden. Brother, thank you so much for coming on today.
My pleasure.
I just wanted to talk to you a little bit today about the mayor's race. It seems like some folks have already, I don't know how you put it, already announced or they already made themselves candidates. I mean, how does that go? Announcement, whatever. How's that go?
Well, the first day to officially sign up would be the day after Election Day in November. That's when you can actually file official paperwork and all of that. We do not have an election in Kentucky in 2021 because in Kentucky, the November after a presidential election is just kind of a dead period where we don't have any official elections. Some small towns may do some stuff and all that, but there's nothing statewide in local or on a county basis. But still, the date's the same. First Tuesday after the first Monday in November would be the election day. So that means that Wednesday you can file your papers and officially become a candidate. The other thing that's important is in Kentucky you can file papers anytime, which would be an intent to run, and then that allows you to officially raise money, which is a big deal. And then other people, even without filing anything official, you can just have a press conference and go, hey, I'm running for mayor. So because Louisville is perceived to be a Democrat Party dominated city,
yes,
in that regard, and because Mayor Fisher is term limited, the frenzy, and I'm going to use that word not tongue in cheek, I mean, it is going to be a frenzy of Democrats coming out to run for mayor because they haven't really had an opportunity in 12 years. It's going to be huge.
Wow.
Republicans, because there is a non-incumbent, will probably field some better candidates than they have more in the past. So even they may start coming out of the woodwork and showing interest and those kind of things. I'm not sure why within party politics, even in a situation where it's obvious that, well, let's take Mayor Fisher, where other prominent Democrats are unhappy with his performance, they still won't come out and run against him. It's just kind of an unwritten rule that you don't. I mean, and the same thing with President Trump most recently. Obviously, there were national Republicans who were not happy with his performance, but they did not come out and primary him.
Right.
So, but we're away from all that now. Again, our mayor is term limited. Okay. So now it's kind of like a free for all. You've already had a couple of folks, one sitting council person, he's the president of the council, David James. I believe that there is an activist who's been fairly prominent in the protesting with Breonna Taylor. She has thrown her name in the ring.
Yes.
And I'm not going to throw anyone else under the bus, but I can tell you that there are at least 2 other council people who have talked about it. There are a couple of former council people who have talked about it. And there are other people within the current administration who have talked about it.
I've heard the name Charles Booker come up.
Charles Booker, well, and I was going to finish up with him. Okay. He is a current state rep and was very prominent in the most recent Senate race. And so everybody, I mean, he did quite well here locally. Very, very popular. when I believe he was the legislative assistant to Councilman David Tandy.
Yes, he was.
And so I got to know him then. Great guy. I mean, we may not agree politically or be in the same party, but I mean, I'll sit down and have a cup of coffee with him anytime and talk politics. He's very knowledgeable and very passionate, which is kind of a big deal. So on the other hand, I love David James. So, and that's kind of, one of the things that we talked about pre-interview, so to speak, is I'm not going to necessarily endorse anyone, but at the same time, I'll give you my peace of mind on who they are and what I know about them. I mean, David is incredibly organized. I love his experience as a police officer. Yes. Because we have such problems right now within that realm of our city. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's technically a rebuilding job. He's essentially taken over the Buffalo Bills, and let's hope that, he can, whoever the next mayor is, can turn the Bills into what they were this year and get them to the championship.
No, he didn't. No, he didn't. That's why I bring you on, brother.
I mean, that's where we are right now. If you want to, I can come up with some other analogies. It's like there's a giant difference between Golden State Warriors without Steph Curry and with them. Right, so there you go. And so right now, if you were going to interview me about the recent police chief, I'm hoping we found Steph Curry.
Okay, all right.
Golden State only won 12 games last year, and that's kind of how the city feels right now. Even if it's not legit, I mean, but just people are down. The police are down. Mm-hmm. The African American community is down, mm-hmm. It's the term perception is reality. Mm-hmm. Really comes into play here. I don't think things are as bad as they seem, but I'm also not willing to say they're good.
Right.
So, so whoever gets elected mayor has got a rebuilding job.
There you go. Yeah, brother, like you said, Louisville, Kentucky, and I love my community, man. When I go overseas, I make it clear. Louisville, Kentucky, and people can always say something. I've been to Philippines and South Africa, and I'll say I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, and they'll tell you something. Muhammad Ali, Kentucky Derby, something like that. And I'm proud of my state, proud of my Commonwealth, proud of my cities. And I say all that just to say, but it has always been, Louisville's always been, for the longest time, as long as I can remember, been perceived as a Democratic Party-controlled city. I can't remember last time this city's ever had a Republican mayor. Do you think the possibility that might change this election?
Well, the old city of Louisville, the pre-merger city of Louisville, would never, ever, ever elect a Republican. That's just a given. Mm-hmm. Every alderman for the last several years, even from more affluent neighborhoods, were all Democrats. But if you think back, we currently have a Republican county clerk. She was elected countywide. Mm-hmm. We had a Republican county judge, Rebecca Jackson, and not since I have been in office as a council person, we had Congresswoman Ann Northup, Republican, also elected countywide. So the proportionality of Democrats to Republicans is it still favors the Democrats as far as registration goes. Mm-hmm. But even heavily registered Democrat areas, for instance, especially some in the South, Southwest, et cetera, they voted for President Trump, for instance.
Wow.
So having a Republican mayor is not out of the realm of possibility. It's much more likely post-merger than pre-merger, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. But it's not necessarily likely, because even if you look at the breakdown of the Metro Council in 2003, when the Metro Council was first elected, 15 Democrats, 11 Republicans. Now it's down to what is it? We're 7 of us, 19-7. So some of those are seats that the Republicans probably should have held on to but didn't. So they may flip back the next time, but at the same time, now we have redistricting coming up before the next election. So typically everybody who's in office makes their seat a little more favorable and a little more comfortable, whether they're Republican or Democrat.
Right.
Things tend to wind up to favor the incumbent. So then there's this other possibility. The city of Louisville is one of only, and I'm making up this number, so don't quote me on it, but I know it's a very tiny number. I'm going to say we are one of less than 10 other cities in the state of Kentucky to actually hold partisan municipal races. Even Lexington's mayor is elected not by party. Now everybody probably knows what party they affiliate with and what's on their registration card. But what's on the ballot is not Republican and Democrat, and you don't really run that way. So you can't really put on your sign in someone's front yard, Democrat for mayor or Republican for mayor. And there is a movement afoot to perhaps change that even for Louisville and the rest of those other, like I said, it's less than 10. It's a very tiny number out of like 206 cities statewide. I wish I knew the numbers to be a little more authoritative, but
so look,
for a city our size, if you went nonpartisan, it would make a giant difference where you may wind up with better candidates and better turnout because people now are kind of forced to do research as opposed to marking just a straight ticket, which I've never been a fan of. Just walking in and the top of the ballot and marking either Republican or Democrat. Now, they'll never remove that from the ballot in the state of Kentucky because although marking straight ticket Democrat benefits Democrats in Louisville, there's a whole lot of people out in the state who mark straight ticket Republican, and it benefits them out, in the more rural areas. So there's always some elected official somewhere that benefits from that straight ticket mark, and so they'll never, ever necessarily remove it, but they can remove the partisan label from individual races and go from there.
So if you're doing like you said, that nonpartisan route, well, let me put it this way: if there was to be the realistic possibility of a Republican getting the mayor's office, would he or she just have to like really emphasize running quote unquote on the issues?
Well, they wouldn't necessarily have to. Heck, it's kind of like I differentiated a while ago between holding a press conference and saying you're running for mayor and officially filing papers. Just because it's not on the ballot doesn't mean that every ad that you have on television, you're not saying Corbin Sievers, Democrat for mayor. I mean, you can do that all you want. You can put it on signage. You can make sure everybody knows your political party. The difference is when it comes to what's actually on the ballot. So people have to actually give it some thought when they cast their vote and can't mark straight ticket, because even if they walk in as devout Republicans or devout Democrats and mark a straight ticket vote at the top, you technically have not cast a vote for all the nonpartisan races. Which is why, and I guess a good example of that, and you'd have to go back and do some research, look at how many more people vote for mayor, governor, president than, say, vote for the judges. Because judges are all nonpartisan, always have been. And so when you look at the vote total, there's significantly less people voting for the judge, even though they're in the same ballot box and it only takes a few seconds more. Why? Because there's a lot of people who mark straight ticket. And the difference between, for instance, the mayor's race and the judge's races on the back of the ballot is probably the very, very close to the number of people who mark straight ticket. So that it would cast the mayor's race or the metro council races, it would cast them into the same vein as judges, unless people took the time to actually go mark an individual name.
There you go. Okay.
Their vote isn't going to count if they vote straight ticket.
Okay. Let me just speak to my listeners real quick. This is Book Talk with Corbin. I'm your host. I'm interviewing Mr. James Peden. He's on the Metro City Council, Louisville, Kentucky. He's been with us before. We did a great interview of him when he talked about Breonna Taylor. Please go look that up, view that, share that. It was a pretty powerful interview and one of the most liked interviews I've done with Book Talk with Corbin. Brother, we just got a few minutes left. let's engage in a little fantasy thought here. Let's say that the Republican Party is put up a candidate, and that candidate's called you into the office and said, "Hey, give me one or two things I need to do to win."
Well, probably at this point where we are, it would number one would be to emphasize public safety. And I don't necessarily mean the police department specifically, as much as that the next mayor is going to have to instill in people a sense of confidence about being able to go downtown, about being able to, go back to 4th Street Live, to be able to go back to the Yum Center.
Amen.
My wife and I, we still go to dinner downtown, and it's very, very sad when the restaurant you wanted to go to is closed because they just hadn't had any business today, so they closed early, even though they're still technically open. Right. It's sad when I try to go down there, go down to dinner, go down for lunch, and I'll give you one that's not fancy. It's right in everybody's wheelhouse as far as, middle-class restaurant. That'd be the old Spaghetti Factory. Used to be packed at lunch. Now I might stop in there on the way out of the office and just to grab some takeout to go home, and there aren't two tables in there. So the lunch crowd downtown is just awful. So we have to rebuild that. The next mayor's going to have to get people who have learned to work remotely. That we have to get those companies, those law firms, Humana, who everybody in the Mercer/Agon building. We're going to have to get them bringing their employees back downtown. So that's number one. Number two, probably still, regardless of where we are with the vaccine, we are going to be in the midst of COVID recovery. Still, even upon the election of a new mayor. So we're going to have to figure those things out as far as financial needs, rent assistance, getting, a lot. I think there's going to be a lot of lower end jobs that are just going to disappear. Right down to the fact that, for instance, McDonald's is probably going to automate taking your order kind of stuff. Just because they're forced into that because of COVID, and they're forced into that ordering online and, doing the DoorDash thing. A lot of that stuff isn't going to go away just because now we don't have to wear a mask and can go out in public. Right. So again, it kind of, the second one about COVID recovery lends itself to what I was saying about public safety. But the first one is more of you need to reassure public things are safe. I'm not talking about rebuilding the police department. I'm not saying, that we need to go and arrest a whole lot of folks. I'm not saying that at all. It is a sense of confidence. And then COVID recovery would include economic development. If we've lost anybody, if we've lost any major business, keep them, try to get them back, figure out what we got to do to aid them. Don't let them close their doors. At the same time, if I were mayor kind of thing, I'd be taking advantage of other cities who may or may not be losing their businesses. Elon Musk, for instance, pretty much picked up his entire operation out of California and is moving it to Texas. Yeah. So I'm sitting here thinking to myself, it's like, okay, I really think that the COVID restrictions in Kentucky are pretty bad, but if you got a place that's worse, let's go after those guys.
There you go. Right.
So take advantage of those kind of moves. Again, Kentucky, a lot of the advantages of Kentucky you can't replace. We are dead center, north to south of the United States, equidistant pretty much from the Canada as it is to the Gulf of Mexico. And we touch the Mississippi River, so we're pretty centrally located. What is it? We're, I don't know. Someone the GLI throws out a stat that we are within a day's drive of 70% of the population of the United States, something like that. Another reason why UPS is here and Amazon has multiple fulfillment centers. Yeah. We really are kind of geographic. That's a geographic advantage that, it may not be the sunny shores of Florida with all those growing cities, and I understand why people. This is. After yesterday or 2 days ago snow, now we know why people move to Florida. But we do have our advantages. Let's use them.
There you go. All right. Well, brother, thank you so much. As always, it's been informative.
No, I love coming on.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that. And of course, again, want to say to my listeners, look, you got to look that up. Go to youtube.com, put in the search engine Book Talk with Corbin, and then or Book Talk with Corbin / James Peden or Breonna Taylor interview, and it will come up. It was a great interview, just like this, and it was a great interview. And I know we're going to get a lot of. I needed people to hit that like button and hit that subscribe button.